Bumpy Johnson and Malcolm X locked eyes across a crowded room. No words, no movement, just two men who understood each other completely. A tavern ballroom. Thomas Hagan was standing up, shotgun emerging from under his coat. 400 people had no idea what was about to happen. But Bumpy knew. He was 10 feet behind Hagan, gun already high, and his hand, finger on the trigger. One bullet, one dead assassin. Malcolm lives. That's when Malcolm turned, saw Bumpy, saw the gun, saw the choice Bumpy was about to make. Malcolm shook his head slowly, then smiled. Bumpy's eyes dropped to the little girl between them. Brown dress, pigtails, maybe 6 years old. She had slipped off her father's lap, climbing onto a chair, leaning into the aisle, directly in the line of fire. If Bumpy pulled the trigger now, the bullet would go through her before it ever reached Hagan. When Bumpy looked back up, Malcolm mouthed 3 well. RDS, I day standing. The shotgun blast echoed through the ballroom. Bumpy Johnson didn't save Malcolm X that day, but what he did next is why the killer never escaped. To understand that afternoon, you need to understand the promise Bumpy made earlier. Malcolm X's house in Queens exploded in flames. Molotov cocktails through the bedroom window. His wife Betty and their 4 daughters, the oldest Jay, 6 years old, barely escaped with their lives. The girls were standing in the freezing street in their nightgowns, crying, covered in soot, watching their home burn. Malcolm knew who did it. The Nation of Islam, Elijah Muhammad's enforcers, the brothers he once trusted with his life. They wanted him dead for leaving, for exposing Elijah's corruption, for speaking truth when silence was expected. The morning after the fire, Bumpy Johnson walked into Columbia Presbyterian Hospital unannounced. No phone call, no flowers, just showed up at dawn in his tailored suit and fetter. AF found Malcolm in the waiting room wall. Doctors checked his daughters for smoke inhalation. Bumpy sat down beside him. Didn't say hello, just got to the point. Give me 48 hours. The men who did this won't see Wednesday. Malcolm was staring at the floor, exhausted, traumatized. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady but sad. If you do that, I become everything they say. I am a hypocrite hiding behind a gangster's gun. You'd be alive. I'd be dead inside. Malcolm turned to face him. I've spent years preaching that violence breeds violence. I can't abandon that. The moment I am scared, Bumpy's jaw tightened. This ain't about principles, Malcolm. This is about your wife, your babies. They could have burned alive last night. I know, Malcolm's voice seek slightly, but if I let you kill for me, I destroy everything I've built. Violence for violence, blood for blood. That's the cycle I'm trying to break. Bumpy respected that answer. Hated it, but respected it. Then let me protect you. My best men, armed, watching. Malcolm shook his head. You're a dead man, Malcolm. You know that. Maybe. Malcolm extended his hand. But I'll die clean. I'll die standing. Bumpy shook his hand. Held it for a moment. They won't get away with it. I know, Malcolm said quietly, but don't do it for me. I've made my peace at the door. Bumpy stopped. 3 days. Malcolm, I'm giving you 3 days to change your mind. Malcolm just smiled. I won't. Later that night, Bumpy's phone rang. It was a busboy named Jerome who worked the graveyard shift at a diner on Malcolm X Boulevard. Jerome had grown up 3 blocks from Bumpy's apartment. And like half the young men in Harlem, he knew exactly who to call when something didn't feel right. Mr. Johnson. Jerome's voice was shaking. 3 men just left my diner, corner booth. They were talking about handling the preacher problem. Mentioned tomorrow, mentioned the Audubon, mentioned shotgun. Bumpy sat up in bed. Names, one of them. They called him Hagan, Thomas Hagan. Bumpy closed his eyes. He knew that name, Nation of Islam enforcer. Cold, efficient, a true believer who, though Killing was holy work. You did good, Jerome. Real good. Now forget you heard anything. After hanging up, Bumpy tried calling Malcolm. No answer. Sent word through every contact he had. Nothing call. Me back. So Bumpy Johnson broke his own rules. He went alone. Audubon Ballroom was filling up fast. 400 people, families, students, old women who'd known Malcolm since he was a street hustle. Our young men who saw him as the voice of a new America. Bumpy walked in wearing his usual dark suit. Nothing flashy. Bumpy didn't need flash. He carried power in silence. He didn't take a seat in the back. He moved into the crowd, positioning himself against a pillar on the left side, row 5. Good sight lines, close enough tack, multiple exits visible. Survival instinct never sleeps. He scanned. Ed faces. Most were regulars. Malcolm's people. Good people, but 3 weren't. Front section, 2 rows apart, to still, not engage with the opening speakers, just waiting. The one in the center, row 3, was Thomas Hagan. Bumpy recognized the dead look in his eyes, the stillness of a man who'd already decided to kill. Bumpy's hand moved under his jacket, felt the weight of his .38 revolver. He could walk down that short aisle right. Now to quick shots, Hagan and his backup, dead before they hit the floor. But 400 witnesses, panic, stampede, innocent people crushed, and Malcolm would just die tomorrow instead. You can't stop fanatics by killing one. They're a sickness. You have to cut out the whole infection. So Bumpy stood by the pillar. Watch, Washington. I did. The moderator's voice carried through the ballroom. Brothers and sisters, I present to you Malcolm X. 400 people stood, applauded. Malcolm walked onto the stage in a simple dark suit. No security, no bodyguards, just a man and his message. He raised his hands for quiet. The applause faded. Everyone said, Assalamu alaikum. Malcolm said, Walaikum, assalam. The crowd responded. Bumpy's eyes neat. Our left Hagan. He watched the killer lean forward slightly, watched his hand move inside his coat, then chaos. Someone in the middle section jumped up, shouting, Get your hand out of my pocket. What's wrong with you? A classic distraction. Make everyone turn, create confusion. In that moment, the killers moved. Thomas Hagan stood. His coat fell open. The sawed-off shotgun appeared. Q. T down. Brutal. Designed to destroy Bumpy's .38 revolver was already in his hand, halfway out of his jacket. Finger on the trigger. 10 feet. Easy shot. Angle was clean. Then Bumpy saw her. The little girl, white ribbons in her pigtails. In the confusion, she had climbed up onto her chair, leaning back to look at the commotion behind her. She was directly between Bumpy and Hagan. If Bumpy fired now at that downward angle, he couldn't miss her. Bumpy's jaw clenched. He stepped left to clear the shot, blocked by people standing up. Right. Same problem. That's when Malcolm turned not toward Hagan, toward Bumpy, as if he'd known all along that Bumpy would be there. For moments that felt like hours, their eyes met. In that frozen moment, Malcolm understood everything. He saw the gun in Bumpy's hand. He saw the desperation in his friend's face, the calculation, the impossible mathematics of violence. He saw the little girl between them, innocent, oblivious, leaning into the aisle in her brown Sunday dress. Malcolm knew Bumpy could pull that trigger. Knew the bullet would tear through that child before it ever reached Hagan. Knew Bumpy was silently asking him a question that no man should ever have to answer. Is your life worth hers? Malcolm had spent years preaching that one life wasn't more valuable than another, that children were sacred, that violence in the name of justice was still violence, that the means mattered as much as the ends. Now he had to prove it, not with words, not with speeches, with a choice. So Malcolm gave Bumpy the only answer a man of principle could give. He shook his head slowly, deliberately. Then he smiled. Not fear, not panic, but acceptance, and mouthed 3 words. I die standing, bump. Why his finger froze on the trigger, the man standing in front of Bumpy shifted suddenly, blocking the view entirely. Bumpy shoved forward, trying to see. Boom! The shotgun blast was deafening. By the T. I'm Bumpy's line of sight cleared. Malcolm was stumbling backward, blood spreading across his chest. He tried to stay on his feet, tried to stand, but 2 more men rushed the stage with pistol. Ailes, firing, firing, firing. 16 bullets found Malcolm X. He fell, and Bumpy Johnson, the man who stopped Ellsworth, who'd faced down the Italian mafia, who'd killed without hesitation for years, stood frozen, gun in hand, unable to save the one man who mattered most. The ballroom erupted, screaming, crying, people diving under chairs, mothers throwing themselves over children. Thomas Hagan turned and ran for the exit, shotgun still in his hands, smoke still rising from the barrel. Something inside Bumpy snapped. Not the explosive kind, the cold kind, the lethal kind. He moved fast, smooth, predatory. He couldn't fire his gun. Too many people in the way, panic everywhere. One shot and innocent people die in the crossfire. So Bumpy ran, closing the distance, 15 feet, 10. 5 Hagan was at the exit door, reaching for the handle. 30 seconds from freedom, Bumpy lunged low, swept his leg forward, hooked Hagan's ankle with perfect precision. Hagan's momentum carried him forward, but his feet went backward. He crashed face first onto the polished ballroom floor. The shotgun flew from his hands, spinning across the wood. Bumpy kicked it hard, sent it sliding under a row of overturned chairs. Gone. Hagan scrambled to his knees, wildly, reaching for the pistol in his waistband. Bumpy grabbed his wrist, twisted. The small revolver clattered away. Then Bumpy did something unexpected. He didn't kill Hagan, didn't beat him, didn't pull his own gun. Bumpy had a reason for not pulling that trigger. It wasn't mercy. It was never mercy. If he fired, he'd be the only man found with a smoking gun when the cops arrived. It would turn a martyrdom into a gangland shootout. Bumpy couldn't do that to Malcolm's legacy. More importantly, dead men don't talk. Hagan needed to talk. He needed to say who gave the order, who funded it, who sanctioned it, and most of all, this man took Malcolm from the people, so Bumpy was going to give him back to the people. He grabbed Hagan by the collar, lifted him halfway up, then shoved him backward into the surging crowd. 20 men rushed forward. They just watched Malcolm X get murdered, watched him fall, and now the killer was right there. A fist connected with Hagan's jaw, then another, then 5 more hands, grabbing, pulling, beating. Bumpy stepped back. Let them have him. Let them deliver the justice the courts couldn't. He leaned close to the mob, voice low but carrying. Don't let him breathe. Don't let him run. Make him answer for what he did. The crowd understood. They pinned Hagan to the floor, held him down like a wild animal. Police sirens wailed outside, getting closer. Bumpy Johnson walked calmly toward the side exit, through the chaos, through the crying, through the smoke still hanging in the air. By the time police flooded through the front doors, Bumpy was 3 blocks away, disappearing into Harlem streets like he'd never been there at all. Behind him, Thomas Hagan was on the ground, bleeding, beaten, but alive. Alive to stand trial, alive to rot in prison, alive to spend every day for the rest of his life knowing he failed, knowing Malcolm X died. Standing, knowing Harlem never forgets. Malcolm X was pronounced dead at Columbia Presbyterian Hospital. 16 gunshot wounds, 39 years old, gone. Bumpy didn't go to the hospital, couldn't. Too many cops, too many questions, too much attention. Instead, he went to a place he hadn't visited in years, St. Philip's Church, small, quiet, empty. He sat in the last pew, alone, still wearing his blood-stained jacket, Malcolm's blood. The old priest, Father Callahan, Found him there. You don't come here. The priestess say. It softly. No, but you're here now. Bumpy didn't answer, just stared at the cross hanging above the altar, the silence, the empty space. I was 10 feet away, Bumpy finally said, his voice bare, lee above a whisper. I had my gun out. I could have stopped it, but there was a little girl, 6 years old, right in the line of fire. Father Callahan sat down in the pew in front of him, T.U., turned to face Bumpy. So, you chose the child's life over Malcolm's. Malcolm chose it. Bumpy's voice cracked. He looked at me, saw my gun, and he shook his head, told me to let him go. Th. And you gave him what he wanted. I gave him death. Bumpy's hands clenched into fists. I could have moved, could have found another angle, could have done something, but I froze and I watched him die. The priest was quiet for a long moment. Then Malcolm X lived his entire life preparing to die for his beliefs. You didn't take that from him. You honored it. Honoring it doesn't bring him back. No, but Malcolm knew what he was choosing. He chose integrity over survival. He chose to die standing rather than live on his knees. Not many men have that courage. Bumpy stood up. Butoni D his jacket over the bloodstains. Hagan's alive. The crowd beat him, but he'll live to stand trial. And the others, Bumpy's expression went cold. There were 3 shooters. Hagan's in custody. The other 2 ran. Will they escape? No. Bumpy's voice was ice. They won't. Father Callahan understood. Vengeance won't heal this wound. Maybe not. Bumpy turned toward the door, but it's all I have left to give him. Malcolm X's funeral was held at Faith Temple Church of God in Christ. Thousands of people packed inside. Thousands more lined the streets of Harlem. Bumpy Johnson stood in Th. Evac, not with dignitaries, not with family, just against the wall watching. Betty Sheebaz, Malcolm's widow, saw him. Their eyes met across the crowded church. She nodded once, small, sad, acknowledging. She knew Bumpy had been there. She knew he tried. She knew Thomas Hagan was in custody because Bumpy made sure he couldn't run. After the service, Bumpy walked alone to F. Martincliff Cemetery where Malcolm would be buried. He stood at the edge of the open grave, looking down at the casket. From his pocket, he pulled out something small, his straight razor, the one he'd carried for years, the one that made men in Harlem cross the street when they saw him coming. The symbol of his power, his survival, his code. He placed it gently on the coffin lid. You died. Standing, Bumpy said quietly, just like you wanted. But the men who killed you, they're going to die scared. That's my promise, and Bumpy Johnson kept that promise. Within months, the other 2 shooters, the ones who'd escaped that day, were found not by police, by Harlem, by Bumpy's network. They never stood trial, they just disappeared. The history books don't mention that paw. RT, the history books say Thomas Hagan was convicted, and the other 2 escaped justice. But ask anyone who lived in Harlem, they'll tell you different. Bumpy Johnson died 3 years after Malcolm. Heart attack at Wells Restaurant in Harlem. No violence, no shootout, just an old warrior's heart finally given out. At his funeral, someone asked one of Bumpy's oldest friends, what was Bumpy's greatest moment? The friend thought for a long time, then said, when he sat in that ballroom with his gun drawn and respected Malcolm's choice, even though it killed him inside, that's when Bumpy proved he wasn't just a gangster. He was a man of honor. Bumpy Johnson had killed for money, for power, for respect, for survival. But on that afternoon, he chose not to kill, chose to honor a friend's wish, chose to let Malcolm X die standing with dignity on his own terms. That's not in the history books, but it should be because sometimes the hardest thing a man with a gun can do is not pull the trigger. Sometimes the bravest thing a killer can do is let someone die. Malcolm X died standing, and Bumpy Johnson made sure the world remembered that. If this story of honor, sacrifice, and impossible choices moved you, Hit that subscribe button and smash that like. Share this with someone who needs to understand what real strength looks like. Drop a comment with "You have pulled the trigger," and don't forget to ring that notification bell for more untold stories from the streets that made